Hello and welcome to this video series on our service overview for Express Maintenance Work Orders tab. My name is Eric Waymire, and during this particular session or video, we're going to be taking a look at setup and best practices. And I won't go through all the bullet lists, but our main goal here is to make sure that by the time you're done setting up your services, the service overview should be easy to manage. We're talking an hour at most on planning and scheduling your services into work orders a week, unless you are just running major operations. But this should not be a very time-consuming process. And if you follow these steps, then I think you're going to be very happy with your service overview and its ability to make sure that you are automating your PM structure. So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, again, back to your service overview. And if you're going to get there, you're going to go to the Maintenance tab, Work Order tab. Here's your Work Order tab. Open up the Service Overview. Now, in order to get your Service Overview functioning consistently, then you want to make sure that you set it up properly. And the things that we're going to be taking a look at first are our services and how to create a service. So in order to get to services, you go to Administration, Services, and then Service Setup. I'm going to go to the Overview tab to give you an idea of what your services tab should look like. And you'll notice here that we have the service name, its cost center, the category, the work group, the period, interval, basis, and logic labor estimate. I'm going to get into each one of these. But always remember that if there's something in here that you don't use, you can always go to your grid properties and identify those things that you don't need to see or want to see or reorder. Another thing that's functional here that most people aren't aware of is if you have a whole list of services here by the time you're done, and especially if you add all of your repair services, you can click and drag this column up into this sort and filter area, and it will automatically develop a tree for you based on the categories. Once I'm ready to see them all again, I just simply drag that category back. Now, let's take a look at our air compressor 1000 hour offline PM. Let's talk strategy here. When you are building your services, you want to be intentional about your service names. And here's the way that we recommend that you do it. You go your noun, which is your equipment, then your verb, and that is what you're actually doing to the equipment. So this is a preventive maintenance scheduled service. So in this case, it's just 1000 hour. And then if you have certain tasks as part of your preventive maintenance that require the machine to be offline or not running, then we recommend that you split up those into two separate services. So we could have 1000 hour online PM and a 1000 hour offline PM. The idea there is that if you have to be able to schedule that machine down with production, then you would mark it as online. And that way you would know that that is a service that needs to be coordinated with production. And you'll see how we coordinate that with production through the work order class field in planning and scheduling, which we'll teach after this video. So that's your service name. Okay, you could be as specific as you want here, but the minimum that we recommend is air compressor, the noun or the equipment, what you're going to do to that equipment, and then it's online or offline, and then if it's a PM or something else. Then your category for scheduled services is preventive maintenance, work order, group, or work group. In this case, we have maintenance. Again, all of these are totally customizable. If you've been given access, you can manage the codes here. Your cost center, you can pre-assign your cost center if it's going to be the same every time. In this case, this cost center is described as maintenance labor. So that's the one we're going to pick here. Service reference, that is a free-form field. You can use it for anything you want. We've seen people put pages in their service manuals and or links to websites and things like that. Labor estimate. Look, this is extremely important. If you want to run a world-class maintenance shop, you need to estimate the amount of time it's going to take for your guys to perform these services. And I'll show you why on the service overview. In fact, I'm going to jump there now. I go to the service overview and I'm looking at the end product now. So I've added the service, I've assigned it to equipment, I've added the parts. Notice that we have over here the labor estimate, and down here we have a total. This labor estimate will be available on the service overview as well as the work order overview. So we have the labor estimate over here on the number of work orders that are scheduled between this time. That's important. It's helpful for your planning and scheduling, but it's also helpful for if ever you're doing root cause analysis and you see that the labor time was 2 hours, or the estimated labor time was 2 hours, but the actual time was 6 hours. Then you want to start asking questions about, why did it take an extra 4 hours? Well, we couldn't find the part. The work instructions weren't very detailed. I had to go find the manual, and you can fix that. And so I think labor estimate is one of the things that people just overlook because they don't want to take the time to enter it. But again, the more work you do on the front end here, the more happy you're going to be with your ability to schedule your services, and you'll spend less time in the software and more time turning wrenches. So that's that. Let's go back to the services. Okay, so here back at the services, I do want to also cover a repair service. So we looked at a preventive maintenance. Over here we have repair. These are a little easier. Okay, so there's a couple different things that you should consider here. First is the service name. Notice that we have AA breakdown work. Okay, this is a repair service that is a general service, and we provide this to our work order requesters. Notice that we have this particular one in requests. That means that our requesters will be able to select this service from the drop-down menu. This is so that the requesters, if they don't know what's wrong, then they have an option to pick from. Otherwise, if they don't have any option, then they won't pick anything, and you won't get the request. Now, there's another idea behind this, that you leave this out and you just put in things like ballast replacement. Notice the sequence here again. It's a noun, verb. There's another one. We have a couple belts in here. Belt repair. Next one is belt replace. So notice the specificity. Why would we do that? Especially on repairs. I want to have these kinds of services, these repair services available, especially for my maintenance team. Maybe not necessarily, the requesters don't need to have that kind of detail. So you could remove this from requests so that it doesn't confuse your requesters. Just have a couple general services that they can pick, because at the end of the day, the maintenance team, when they go to the work orders, are going to modify those services. So let's say that here's your work order, and somebody picked initially breakdown work, and then through troubleshooting, the technician finds that it was actually the belt, and so they purchased the belt, or they consumed the belt on the work order. Before they close this work order, they should be able to type in belt and whether they replaced it or repaired it. And that should be a part of your maintenance management culture. The reason for this is, if you don't do this and you just leave general maintenance or some really general definition here, you're going to lose out on enormous root cause analysis data, because you can actually run reports on your demand work orders and then sort those by services performed, labor estimate, or actual labor, or parts cost, any one of those, in order to do some root cause analysis on your breakdown works. So if you just type in replace the belt here, this isn't a field that you can run reports on. Neither is the technician notes. You can't sort or have any kind of consistency unless you have a drop-down option for your maintenance team on the demand repairs that they are adding to the work orders. Okay, so I won't beat that up anymore, but something you should highly consider. A lot of people look over that, but let's move on. So once we get past that, excuse me, let's go back to the services setup here. That's adding a repair. So again, we looked at both your planned services. Here's a demand service, okay? And of course, either one of those, if you have certain work instructions that you want to appear on every work order, this is where you do it. So you add your service name, your category, your work group, your cost center, service reference, labor estimate. Of course, your labor estimates aren't going to go on your breakdown work. unless you know what that is. Most people don't. And cost estimate. Over here on the PM schedule, okay, of course, this doesn't apply to a repair, so we're going to come over here to a PM, and I like one with a little bit more text on it. That'll work. And I can click on this PM scheduler, and we have renewal period, we have renewal basis, and we have renewal logic. So the renewal period, what you're doing is you're selecting every 1 month is how you would do that. If you want to do every 3 months, you just simply change this to a 3. If you want to go by general counts, or if you want to get specific with your counts, you can go hours, kilometers, and miles. Okay, and you can actually have your PM program circulating and rescheduling your services, your scheduled services, based on counts. Okay, if you're not familiar with that, check out the equipment video, and it shows you how to apply those services to counts. So then on the renewal basis, you have 3 options. You have work order completion, service originally scheduled, and work order manual. Working from top to bottom here, if we look at work order completion, what we're saying is that whenever this work order or this service gets converted to a work order and that work order is completed, how is it going to renew? Is it going to renew based on when the work order was completed? Or if I have it originally scheduled for May 1st and I finish it on May 10th, then does it reschedule 1 month from now exactly on the 10th, or based on when it was originally scheduled on May 1st? So if I have service originally scheduled, if I complete it on May 1st, or if it's scheduled for May 1st and I complete it on May 10th, it's going to reschedule for June 1st. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And then work order manual, not very many people use this, but basically it just keeps it from rescheduling at all, and requires you to manually reschedule that service. In fact, I don't know anybody that uses that. And then down here, you have some renewal logic based on calculated date. It's going to take the renewal period and renewal basis and calculate that date for you. Or you can use those 2 plus calculating weekdays only. So it's still going to calculate, but it's not going to allow it to schedule for weekends. And then you have specific date in the month, and then you have a fixed day of the month or week. So that is how the scheduler works. Now, once you have added your service, going back to the service overview, you've got your grid properties set up, and you are ready to assign these services to equipment. Now, in order to get these services scheduled, you have to add them to a piece of equipment. All right, in this case, we have an air compressor, and then we have this service tab, and this is where we would add the services that we just created. So if I have this semi-annual offline PM, it's in my drop-down here. This is a drop-down list of all of the services. If I don't want to go through that whole list, I can just start typing in. And then it's only going to show me those things that start with the letters I've typed. So in this case, I know it's an air compressor, and it was not the 1,000 hour. It's actually the semi-annual. So I'm going to erase that. Now, once you have added the service, you want to make sure that you have your grid properties set up something like this. Okay, you'll notice I've got the service name, the labor estimate. I want that right next to it because if it's not already in there, I want to add it. I have the status. Your statuses are simply normal, picked, assigned, or inactive. Normal, as you can see, is not assigned. Picked means that it's been picked as a service to create a work order. If it's been assigned, it's an actual open work order. If it's inactive, it means it's not going to reschedule. Then I want to make sure that I have added my service parts. And here you go. This particular part requires a motor replacement, and it says we have quantity on hand. How many does it require? This needs to be updated to add 1. So now, whenever this service gets converted to a work order, it's automatically going to assign that part to it. And then whenever that part gets consumed on the work order, it will reduce it from inventory. Very important that you add your parts to your services. Now, you also have your last perform date, last schedule date, and schedule date. You can enter the last perform date if you know it. If not, you just enter the next schedule date. and it will calculate for you. You have your period and interval, which may or may not be necessary. Last performed count, from now, current count. I leave these counts up here is because even though a lot of our services and a lot of your services are probably going to be date based, you do have some that are count based. And the way that that works is I have my current count right here on my equipment. This is updated in 3 different ways. I can update this on a work order. So if I go to the work order and I have a machine with count, I look at the counts and I update it here on the work order. When I add a new count, an updated count to a work order, it automatically updates my equipment. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is I can go over here to update counts and then search units. All of the units that currently have counts on them will show up, and then I can modify the counts right here. Okay, this is a good list to print off, go around the facility, get the current counts on these, and then come back and update it. It's really easy. But the third way is as you can see, you can connect this to a data source so that it updates those counts automatically. And we'll get into that another time. Okay, so that's how you can use counts, and that's why you might need some of these options over here. The work group, the basis, the logics, the notes, the separate work order. This separate work order, what it does is if I have this selected, then every single time that this service comes due and I'm converting it from a service to a work order, it's going to automatically put this service on a separate work order every single time. You'll see here in a little bit, once we get into planning and scheduling, that there are times where you have multiple services. You might have the monthly, the quarterly, and the annual all come due in the same month on the same piece of equipment. Then you would just put all of those onto one work order if you want to. You don't have to do it that way. But if you have a service that you need to always be on a separate work order, that's what that field is for. You got your cost estimate, and then you have your employee. And I actually prefer to have my employee over here so that it's kind of in front of everything. And I want to pre-assign that employee if that's something that you do. You can also pre-assign a work group if that's how you do things. Work groups can be maintenance, it can be electricians, it can be shifts, however you want to use that. Okay, now once you've assigned the service and to the equipment and then the part to the service, you're ready for the service overview. Once you've done those things, your service overview should look like this. Now, some of you, if this is the first time using Express Maintenance, you don't have these filters. You just need to select this magnifying glass here to show your filters. Now let's talk about the grid properties here. Again, every Express Maintenance menu has some grid properties, and we've got lots of options here not selected. But these are the ones that I have here are the ones that I use in training or demonstrating the capabilities of the software. So you'll see I have unit name, the service, its status, whether it's what day it's due on, period and interval. This from now are counts or days. So if it's a time-based PM, these are the days before they're due, or if they're overdue, in this case, 74 days. Assigned parts, work orders, work group, labor estimate, and technician. If I want to see the general notes, I can go services general notes and add that, and I can actually see those work instructions right there, and I can modify them if I need to. Okay, so once you have done that, you've got your grid properties set up. The next thing you need to do is modify your footer properties. So you want to see your total labor estimate. It's as simple as right-clicking down here on your footer and identifying if you wanted to do sum, minimum, maximum, count, average, or none. I think, oh, one more thing I want to show you, and I'm covering this in a couple different videos, and that's because on the work order, when we get into planning and scheduling, I think it's extremely important that you be intentional and strategic about how you enter the data and how you plan and schedule your services, whether they're demand or planned. And so take a look at this field, this class field, and if yours isn't set up like this, if you have other information in here, I'd recommend that you make room for this information. Okay, most people use the category less people use the group, and even less people use the class. But if you have something in class, see if you can move it to category or group. Okay, we have our category. This is set up like a tree between category and group. Our category is our tells us whether or not it's demand or planned. And then the group tells us if it is planned, is it preventive maintenance, predictive maintenance, or was it a work order that was generated from a PM or predictive maintenance service? Now, if it's demand, then I have an option to select breakdown codes. Okay, so that when I run my reports on total cost to maintain, and I want to know how much labor and parts were associated with planned maintenance and how much cost associated with labor and parts were associated with demand maintenance, then I can run that report because of this field. If I then want to take all of my repair services or my demand services and figure out total cost by breakdown code, I can do that. And then if I want to get even further and see all of my mechanical breakdowns and see which services were applied, I can do that. Now, this class field is what you'll use so that when a service comes due, you may not know if you have the parts on hand. You may not know if that's an online PM, whether or not you need to schedule that with production. Okay, but by being able to categorize or classify your work orders based on these codes, you're going to see that it's a lot easier to manage all of the work orders that show up in your work order overview. Notice that I have my class here. Some of them are scheduled, some are waiting on parts, pending manager's review, ready to schedule. Some of these are need to schedule with production. It's a lot easier to manage this work order overview if you have used that work order class. So that is it for now. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call, or you can chat with us online at expressmaintenance.com, and we look forward to working with you.